Two major defense companies are in a battle for the future of Canada's fighter jet fleet. Sweden's Saab Gripen versus U.S. firm Lockheed Martin's F-35s. This comes after Prime Minister Mark Carney ordered a review of Canada's F-35 contract with Lockheed Martin.
Locked in a trade fight with Donald Trump, you may have heard that the Carney government is reconsidering its multi-billion-dollar purchase of American F-35 fighter jet.
The Pentagon just sent Canada a message that doesn't appear on any official press release. The message is clear: abandon your deal with Sweden's Saab for the Gripen fighter jet, or watch Washington pull defense and intelligence sharing agreements off the table. Mark Carney's government now faces a 90-day deadline to choose between buying American F-35s or risking the alliance that has defined Canadian security for 70 years. This isn't trade rhetoric. This is Pentagon leverage deployed directly at a NATO ally. In early May 2026, Pentagon officials delivered a formal statement to Canada's Defence Ministry. The message outlined specific consequences if Canada proceeds with a mixed fighter fleet, 16 F-35s paired with 72 Gripen aircraft. The Pentagon says this compromise deal fractures NATO interoperability and creates what it calls unacceptable logistics vulnerabilities inside NORAD. But the threat goes deeper than military logistics. Pentagon documents state that Canada's intelligence sharing on Arctic security, estimated at $2.8 billion annually from the Five Eyes alliance, would face review and limitations if Canada diverges from the F-35 ecosystem. The timing is deliberate. Summer 2026 closes the procurement window. After that, costs for both aircraft balloon further, making any decision more expensive. Saab responded publicly within 48 hours, accusing the Pentagon of weaponizing alliance relationships for commercial advantage. The private tension suddenly went public. The Pentagon's position rests on specific leaked documents. On June 8, Reuters obtained a Pentagon memo stating that a fragmented fighter fleet introduces unacceptable operational risk to continental defense, and that F-35 integration is non-negotiable for NORAD planning. That's the official language. But the real leverage sits in the intelligence numbers. Canada currently receives approximately $2, $8 billion annually in Five Eyes intelligence products, signals intelligence, satellite imagery, and classified threat assessments. Pentagon documents note this flow would require revalidation if Canada's platform integration diverges from the F-35. On June 11, Canada's Department of National Defence leaked its own internal analysis. Operating two fighter types for 30 years costs $4.2 billion, more than a single platform commitment. The Royal Canadian Air Force also warned that a Gripen-only logistics chain would require a ground-up infrastructure rebuild estimated at $1.8 billion. Meanwhile, aerospace industry analysis shows 3,200 to 4,600 Canadian manufacturing jobs at risk if the F-35 ecosystem contracts due to reduced Canadian participation. Saab's public response was measured but pointed. We welcome all defence partnerships. Coercion is not partnership. Understanding why the Pentagon is escalating now requires looking at the broader F-35 landscape. The programme faces cost pressures globally. Australia questions its quantities. The United Kingdom has raised concerns. Belgium is reconsidering. The Pentagon fears that if Canada walks away, it signals the deal itself is vulnerable, and a vulnerable deal could trigger cascading allied defections across NATO. Mark Carney's position amplifies this fear. Since becoming Prime Minister, Carney has aggressively pushed back on Washington over tariffs and sovereignty concerns. For the Pentagon, the Gripen interest isn't just an equipment choice, it's political rejection of American defense leadership. The trigger was Canada's Auditor General report in 2025. When the F-35 cost surged to $33 billion, a 75% increase from original estimates, Carney publicly reopened the bidding process. That public signal weakened the Pentagon's core assumption: the deal was locked. It wasn't anymore. The economic consequences alone are substantial. If Canada proceeds with a mixed fleet, the $4 $2 billion lifetime cost premium matters for a country already struggling to meet NATO's 2% defence spending benchmark. The aerospace sector risk is acute. Ontario, Quebec and British Columbia would see 3,200 to 4,600 manufacturing jobs at risk if the F-35 ecosystem contracts. Canadian companies already embedded in the F-35 supply chain have secured $2.1 billion in industrial participation opportunities. Lose that ecosystem, and those contracts disappear. But the political and security impacts cut deeper. NORAD's entire continental defence architecture rests on interoperability assumptions. If a mixed fleet degrades those systems, rebuilding takes 18 to 24 months when North American airspace lacks integrated defence capability. Arctic sovereignty is equally vulnerable. Canada's early warning system for Russian military movements depends on real-time intelligence feeds from Five Eyes. If those feeds face restrictions, Canada detects threats slower in the region where it has the least infrastructure and the highest strategic risk. Domestically, Carney's government is fracturing. Sovereignty hawks inside cabinet want the Gripen deal. The defence establishment argues F-35 superiority is non-negotiable. The Prime Minister stands between them, under pressure from Washington and from his own people. But the real story is more complicated than a Pentagon threat and a Canadian choice. On June 10th at 2:47 am, Mark Carney leaked his own internal strategy memo to select journalists at the Ottawa Citizen. The memo reveals his calculation. If Pentagon pressure becomes public and visible, Carney can frame the F-35 decision as standing up to American coercion while still buying F-35s. He wins politically with sovereignty voters while keeping the Pentagon satisfied. One memo line states it plainly: Pentagon leverage provides domestic political solution. Use threat as negotiating justification for F-35 continuation. What Carney's leaked memo exposes is a deeper shift in how American power operates in 2026. The Pentagon warning isn't fundamentally about interoperability or logistics. It's about signaling that diverging from American defense ecosystem choices carries consequences. This is how the United States disciplines mid-power allies without deploying formal economic sanctions. It's quieter, it's alliance-based, it's harder to push back against. For 60 years, NORAD and NATO meant something automatic. Canada aligned with Washington because alignment was the default. That era is ending. Now alignment requires constant negotiation and threatened withdrawal of benefits. Canada isn't assumed anymore, it must be bought. The Pentagon's real fear isn't the Gripen itself, it's diversification. If Canada succeeds in building a credible Gripen option, Germany and Poland might follow. Turkey is already excluded from the F-35 program entirely. Suddenly Gripen becomes the second-tier NATO option. And suddenly the F-35 looks like a monopoly enforced through coercion rather than a superior choice based on merit. Carney understands this better than most. By leaking Pentagon pressure, he transforms American coercion into a domestic political liability. He can tell Canadian voters, I fought for independence, but Washington forced us. That's plausible deniability. It's strategic brilliance. It keeps both sides partially satisfied while buying him political cover. But the precedent matters globally. If Pentagon threats work on Canada, Australia, Poland and Japan, learn that challenging American defense choices triggers alliance punishment. If Canada holds the Gripen line anyway, it signals mid-powers can diversify without catastrophic consequences. Either way, the world is watching a NATO test case. The Pentagon warning reveals something uncomfortable about alliances in 2026. American defense leadership increasingly depends on explicit leverage rather than assumed alignment. NORAD and NATO no longer bind automatically. They require constant renegotiation and threatened withdrawal of benefits. Defense procurement is no longer purely about military capability, it's about control. The F-35 isn't winning because it's the best aircraft, it's winning because rejecting it carries alliance costs. Mark Carney has found a narrow path, use Pentagon pressure as domestic political cover to stay with the F-35 while claiming he fought for sovereignty. But that path only works if the Pentagon escalates just enough to be visible without fully breaking the alliance. The 90-day clock is ticking. Canada must signal its choice before summer closes. When it does, other allies will be watching to understand the true cost of defending against American pressure. because in 2026, being a close American ally increasingly means accepting constraints, not gaining freedom.